Good.
Hello. So this is another conversation in the Coherence conversation series with me and Antonio syncing together on the idea space of the connection, intersection of building a new society, building new kinds of organizations and technology, with me sharing my ideas from my 30 to 50, depending on how you look at it, years of experience with technology, and Antonio connecting and sharing with his deep experience of building organizations, developing organizations, uh, training, training, and trying to level up the world of organizations.
Good. So, what would you like to tell me to begin with, my friend? We have
So,
spoken about the
yeah, so
Web3 and the protocols and all of that. So, I'm very eager to understand what would you lay out first.
So we did the AI thing last time. Uh, okay, so let's start with the basic thing of the difference between a protocol and a an open protocol. Let's be specific, an open protocol and an application.
Okay.
So simply put, let's say the difference between WhatsApp and email,
Okay.
right? Both are tools. You can use them to talk to lots of people. As a user, maybe they're not even so different. And actually, email is being eaten by lots of big companies. So for many people, email equals Gmail. But they are fundamentally different in that email is a fully open standard, which means anybody can write an interoperable mail server and mail reader application. There are open protocols, and this has allowed, so if Gmail goes away tomorrow, if Google dies, email will still be there and will continue functioning, we'll move on to something else. Unlike WhatsApp, which is
Although
fully
people
owned
might,
by
let me just clarify one thing. Although people using Gmail may lose all their content ultimately that they had on Gmail.
I mean, it depends on what kind of a catastrophe it is. Usually, companies, when they die, they don't like flicker out like this. They usually like have some kind of a thing. And Google has done this to many other services where they said, we're no longer supporting this. You have 6 months to get all of your data out. Goodbye, sorry, sayonara.
Okay.
And for certain services which are, deeply loved, this is heartbreaking to people that have spent, developed whole kinds of workflows and chunks of their life. But if Gmail were to go out, presumably they would give you a way to get your email out. You could stick it into another email application and your life would continue. It
Okay.
would be a disruption, but not a crash. However, if Facebook says goodbye to WhatsApp, I don't know, will they let you get the data out? And the alternative will be contacting people on other proprietary closed chat networks. And we already see this. Everybody knows the problem. Which channel are you on? Are you on Telegram? Are you on WhatsApp? Well, okay, now kind of maybe everybody's on WhatsApp, but it depends on the country. Go to another country, good luck. Go to China, everybody's on WeChat. It's not interconnected because it's not in their interest. It's in the commercial business interest of them to keep into their closed box. SMS, another open standard GSM, you can SMS. It doesn't matter what the phone is. It doesn't matter what the phone network is. You can globally send a SMS to anybody. HTTP, the protocol that we use to access web pages. There's 1,000,001 different web servers, less but still a number of different web browsers, and it's all because open interoperable protocols. So open interoperable protocols are great, and we did really well at defining them in the 1970s, 80s, even into the 90s. But since then, HTML is evolving, the display language that you see web pages through, but it's incremental. It's still all based on the same fundamental standards of the 1990s, right? If you think about the last 25 years, right, of the applications that have come into your life, they are all proprietary applications.
So even the smartphone revolution, you will include in what is old proprietary kind of infrastructure, right?
Well, I mean, you're either living in Google's sandbox or an Apple sandbox, right? And they are open but owned by a corporation, right? Email is not owned by there is open standards bodies. Same thing with the phone standards and so on and so forth. So nobody owns though that explicitly. Yes, there is apps, and the apps have all kinds of protocols and APIs that they run on top of, but those protocols are not open. They are owned by those companies.
Yes.
And Apple has and does regularly make changes which break things, and they're like, eh. So we are in a world, and as more and more of our lives moves into the digital sphere, this becomes more and more important, because more and more of our lives are owned by companies. And setting aside the whole capitalism, whatever debate, the fact of the matter is that companies are not resilient, right? They do not last forever. In fact, the whole premise of capitalism and the design of the economic system is that companies come and go, they die, but the overall economic system stays healthy. However, when we apply this to our daily communication and other protocols, do we really want it to be based around entities that are designed to take risks and go bust regularly? So this is a problem. Plus the whole fact that, a company has, in the current model, has a very specific set of directives in its DNA of what it optimizes for, right? It optimizes for profit, blah, blah, blah. And it's a whole separate conversation that this is what it shouldn't be, and so on and so forth. But in practice, this is what most companies focus on, squeezing out the most money out of the resources, assets that they have. And if you are their resource or asset, well, then you're the one who starts getting wrung out to get the most value squeezed out of you. It's just the nature of the way the system is organized. So what I believe, and many people believe, is we need more open standards. One of these ways of creating, and these are standards for exchanging information, for exchanging value, right? So the internet is being an exchange of information. Email, bunch of bits, information, web pages, bits going back and forth. Blockchain was developed with the idea of creating a way to openly exchange value, and to create the next generation, the backbone infrastructure to enable the next generation of open systems, APIs, interoperable programs. So you've heard of Bitcoin, right?
Yes, of course, yes.
To insult you. I'm just trying to make it easy. And Bitcoin is open in the sense that there is a specification which nobody owns, and you can access any of hundreds of wallet softwares to manipulate your coins which live on the blockchain. There are other problems, because it's still based on computing infrastructure, and what people forget is that, okay, internet is nice and open, but there's probably 5 or 6 companies around the world that control the backbones and the cables, and if they decided to turn off the internet, they would. seeing this in many countries, right? Like all nice and open, but when the government decides to turn off the internet, they turn off the internet. But setting that problem aside,
But that is being
still,
addressed by people, right? There are people that are creating alternative ecosystems, right? I told you about Florence, the man that I met, the first person I
I
met on the
mean,
boat. Something is happening there. We should get to know a bit more about what that is.
but people have been talking again, people have been talking about this for 30 years, and it's just the amount of bandwidth that even this call takes, right? There has been hundreds of billions, probably trillions of investment into infrastructure over the last 30 years. Trillions.
Okay.
Fiber optic cables around the world, now satellites, all of this infrastructure. The fundamental function of economics is that with volume comes cost reduction for pretty much all manufactured things, right? So when you are going up against a behemoth ecosystem that has spent, let's say, 1 trillion euro pound dollars over the last 30 years, laying down pipes and so and so forth, your cost that you can deliver services is going to be hundreds of thousand times more expensive than their cost. So this is a challenge, right? I'm not saying for resilience purposes and that this is a stupid endeavor. I think yes, for resilience purposes, should the global systems really collapse or the government turn really evil, we should be developing those solutions. But in terms of non-centralized, this 1 trillion behemoth fiber optic cable relying internet becoming viable, it's not. I mean, you would just need to invest the trillion euro pound dollars into alternative infrastructure. Nobody's going to do that. So, but that's why for me, right, what I am excited about, and we're getting to maybe the meat of this conversation, is not to try and replace existing mainstream infrastructure which works and is affordable. It's to try and build on top of it the next level collaboration infrastructure which is not captured and owned by either companies or the state. So if you look at it to completely standard infrastructure, roads, asphalt, very fucking important, right? Our lives completely depend on asphalt and on roads. Completely monopolized by the state and construction companies, right? Like good luck putting down an asphalt road by yourself, right? Is this a problem? We are dependent on the state. I got a fucking piece of road blocked here. It's just strange because Portugal usually has good roads. But for since the big hurricane, there's been a critical piece of road blocked. I have no power to fix it myself. I have to wait for the state to do something, right? Should we be developing alternative methodologies for building asphalt or physical roads that are not dependent on the state and large construction companies? Maybe
Well,
to
I
some
mean,
degree.
the more ability that we have to make things happen, the better. But then there is a need of coordination. So what I'm saying is you may be able to physically build it, but then what about the permits and the optimization of where to build it? That is something different. That needs some sort of coordination.
And all of this, and the state controls this, right? Like, I mean, I think it's a fair comparison, right? Building of physical roads versus building of digital internet roads. And it's equally complex and expensive now to build either, right? And if you want to build a bridge across the Tejo, right, you're like, there should be a third bridge. Two is not enough. Woo, good luck just building, like you can't. So
And how
I
does
don't know.
that compare to the virtual world? How does that
So
compare
it's
to each other?
so it's the same thing. If you look at the internet infrastructure, the I should Google this. I'm using a trillion, but it's hundreds of billions for sure over the past 30 years of digging and laying cables under an ocean, of laying the cable all around Africa, of Musk has put 7,000 or something satellites into orbit. These are all massive, massive, multi-hundred million, multi-billion investments which have been done. We can look at the numbers, I can look it up, but it's comparable in terms of size, right? It's at least a couple hundred million to lay a new cable from here to America.
And is there any perception of a breakthrough in technology that may render all of that somewhat obsolete? Like the same way that the car overtook the chariot or the plane overtook the car or the boat?
Well, but I mean, that's what runs on top of the infrastructure. And it's actually the car that required us to make all of these roads.
No, but
In
I'm not
the
talking
end,
about that. I'm saying
no,
that
but in the end,
the car itself is the
physics,
technology, right? The road is an
yes,
enabler and the car is also an enabler, but it's technology that substituted horse riding.
yes, but in the end, the limitation is physics. When it comes, okay, you go from the horse chariot to the car, you go from, I don't know, 10, 15 kilometers an hour to 150, but you're not going to go travel 1,500 kilometers an hour
You go with
because
the plane.
physics, friction, plane still doesn't fly at 1,500. That would
Okay.
be supersonic, and that's become so expensive, right? Technologically, it's possible, but financially, it doesn't work because you're pushing against physics, and it just costs so much to push against the air, right? So technologically, it's possible. We have faster than, and Concorde is gone. We just hit physical things. Same thing with the car, right? We know that, yeah, even an ordinary car could go 100 kilometers per hour, 180 kilometers per hour. At 180, it's both less safe and the fuel consumption is much, much higher. So it stops making sense. When it comes to digital infrastructure, you're not moving physical things, but you still need to move information. You're moving electrons or photons, and they travel very fast, but still their speed is limited and they still need all of the conduits and all of that to travel through, right? So
So
they are
what we are
making,
saying here is that let's leave the infrastructure on where things run alone for all the reasons that you said, but let's make a system where the access to it, which is related to ownership, is different. That's the key thing.
no, what I'm saying is let's focus on building the next thing. I mean, the pipes in the ground problem, right? It's the pipes are there. It's a very, very hard problem to solve, and economically, I don't think it's viable. Also, it's not the thing that's the biggest problem right now. Internet access has become fairly cheap and fairly to very cheap vis-a-vis other things. And at least in Europe and in many other countries, our ability and the whole censorship thing, I think, is a misnomer because people forget that you have a physical body, and if you are going against the government, they'll eventually come get you physically and throw you in jail. And no amount of encryption will protect you from being tortured in a shitty jail in a shitty dictatorship. So what I think we need to really look at is what are we using this technology for? What are the systems that we are building?
Okay.
Because we've only scratched the beginning of the possibilities of what the internet and let alone the blockchain can do. So going back to the blockchain story, which started, I mean, I've been hearing about it for 30 years at least, but Bitcoin came out, I don't know, 1820. However, what has happened is every technology solve or people solve the problems that they know, the problems that they are plugged into. And it's very hard to really know and understand and emphasize with the problems of the people around you, let alone the people that are quite separated from you, whether in social, economic, or geographic, or cultural, or in other ways, right? So blockchain was built by technologies, mostly middle class men of all around the world, but geeky men, and they've just applied it to solve the problems that they see. They haven't been applied. The blockchain promise, it's, you know, I really see, for me, it's the same old image of the same bloody thing that happened to Moses. He just left them alone for a few days to go up the mountain and commune with God. And he came back and everybody was praying to the golden bull. He was like, fuck. And it's the same thing with blockchain. We left them alone with the technology and they just multiplied the worst aspects of the financialized capitalist society, right? With better derivatives at best and more effective Ponzi schemes at worst. So the blockchain has not at all gone out into the mainstream. But there is a huge opportunity there. So now, what is the opportunity that I see? What I am excited about with blockchain is not the replacing money or new currencies thing. I think that's a side issue. It's replacing money sounds really exciting in principle. In practice, it's very hard to make happen. I actually started my journey through the change maker movement. You started in 98, I guess, with Spiral Dynamics. I started in 2008 during the crash with learning about money. What the hell is money? Where does it come from? Who makes money? Do you know who makes money?
The governments?
Wrong. Wrong answer. Private banks. Private banks make money by issuing loans. Fractional banking system.
I was going to go there. I mean, then you multiply the types of money you have in economics. You study M1, M2, M3, which is how do you leverage on top of the existing formal amount of money?
No, but the money that the banks create is also formal, right? It's still counted in the. I don't remember the. I know M1, M2.
When
I
I
don't
mean
remember
formal,
the.
I meant physical in that sense.
Physical money is a small percentage. It's like 5% or
A very
3%
small
of the.
percentage, yes.
So, so I studied the money thing, and for over 100 years, people have been proposing alternative and better systems, and nobody has gotten any traction because money is the fundamental power of the nation state, and it understands it. So the second you try and fiddle with money, you're threatening the nation state, and it has a immune system. It defends itself. So that's why, whilst I think the money question is super important, I think it's really hard to implement something that actually goes wider in practice. Also, I think my big learning from my study of money, so I really love Bernard Lietaer. He's passed away, unfortunately, though I have had the pleasure of talking to some people that worked with him. He wrote a bunch of books on the idea of monetary ecology. Have you come across him, Bernard Lietaer?
No. But yesterday I had a nice conversation with somebody that I'll let you know, which is exactly about money and money creation and money derivatives and all of that. But please go on. I don't know
Yeah.
about that man.
So, So, anyways, I think the money, again, it's more focused on the money side. What I am excited about, and finally we get to the thing which I think is interesting, is the ability or the use of blockchain. So a blockchain, it either the simple Bitcoin, it contains store of value, a public ledger. Ethereum has programs. It's a programmable blockchain, so it can run code. And that gives you much richer opportunities. So effectively, you can think of it as digital contracts. It enables you to create digital agreements, right? And what is collaboration, right? The fundamental human beings are a social species, and that's the fundamental thing we do day in, day out is collaboration, right? There's very little that we can actually do and get done individually. So all of our history as a species has been developing higher and better ways of collaborating, right? Starting with language, moving on to the written word, printing press, telegraph, telephone, internet, email, WhatsApp. It's all about communication, but we communicate for the purpose of creating some sort of, to collaborate, right? Implicitly or explicitly. And collaboration is based on agreement, implicit or explicit.
Yes.
Does it make sense? Do you agree? Does it fit your mental model of reality?
It does.
Right. So now, as you know, you have worked a good amount of time and have had all kinds of experiences as I'm sure with human communication, it's very easy to have misunderstandings. It's every day people assume that somebody said something and they meant this, but they meant something else, and da 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 da.
Yes. And one step back to when you said what you meant about the collaboration, which I do agree, and I see all of that. I think it's relevant that we kind of mentioned this slightly in the previous conversation around when there is a collaboration, there is a dance between what I give and what I get. So this is something that we have to explore deeply at some point in time. It's the
Yes,
contract, right? The
exactly,
essence of the contract.
exactly. And this balance, and there's two parts of it. There's, well, what actually happens, and there's my expectations. And most of the problems in life come from a mismatch of expectations, which are based on some kind of understanding versus the reality,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, and in order to make this stuff work better and be organized, right, we've created all kinds of formal arrangements, right? You're a businessman, right? You work with a client, you write them a proposal,
Yes.
right? You write in detail what they will get and they'll sign it. It can even be read by lawyers in certain things. It's really formal. Or a company, right? What most people don't really understand is that a company is nothing more but a series of agreements between people, actually people at the state, but it's a bunch of agreements,
It's an
right?
agreement between people that has to be compliant with the macro structure, which is represented mostly by the state. Yes.
Yeah. But what most people don't appreciate, certainly with the SA and actually most forms, is the state tells you 5%, the other 95% you can write whatever you like.
Okay. Although this 5%
Right?
may
And
be very, very restrictive. But anyway, I agree. Yes.
restrictive, but the point is that most of what a company is actually not a formal agreement mandated by the state. It's a civil agreement between two people or a group of people, right? Which then
The nature of companies, the reason why changed over the years. And there is a significant moment when companies started to exist exactly in a way by what you were saying, when you could not do the third bridge on your own, when you needed uh, collaboration so that something happened, right? And in the very beginning, the companies started with an end in mind and with a physical end in mind. They were not eternal. They were supposed to achieve a specific goal. And when they became free of having to die, some people, and I guess that this was in the US, some people had a very strong argument about how much of a Pandora box it was being opened. But the eternality won. And what happens is now that instead of a company existing to achieve a specific goal, it exists to achieve permanent goal, which is simply put, maximizing shareholder value. That's it. That's why
So
no
it's actually
came from
it's
tires to cell phones, and I could go on and on.
yeah. So for me, my my main handicap is I'm primarily an English speaker, so I know the stories from the English speaking world better. In the UK, the first company, and I think it was without an end, was the East India Company, and it
Mm-hmm.
required an act of parliament,
Yes.
right? It was such a weird thing, they had to have the government actually vote on it and put it into law. Clearly, it's much easier to make a company now. But going back to the agreements, right? So, and it'd be interesting to learn the history in Portugal, how it developed too. But companies started as these kinds of very big entities, right? Or very, it was not easy, it was cumbersome, it was this strange thing,
Yes.
right? Over the 200, 300 years, we've gotten it to where I walked in, I still had to show up at 5 a.m., but I walked into the office, I got a ticket, and 3, 4 hours later, I walked out with a company. 3, 4 hours later, and under €1,000, I think. So that's a big improvement, right? Versus the act of parliament.
Yes.
However, the that's still a pretty high bar, right? And I have to pay 100, €200 a month on accounting and do all of this. It's still a pretty expensive being to keep alive and maintain.
Mm-hmm.
However, in our modern world, there is a huge, first of all, in the West, in the modern world, and second of all, in the global South, in the poorer people, where, they all have small and micro
Businesses.
collaborations and right? The guy, I don't know, fixing shoes on the street in the slum is not going to open a company for his activity ever, right? And similarly here, right? Like, let's even talk about this coherence thing here. I mean, right now we don't have a budget, but let's say we manage to raise some fundraising, right? We're not going to start a company for this 3-month project of a bunch of things, right? Because a company is too heavy, a collaboration container, to be able to make it worthwhile. So what I believe is that the government has gotten pretty much as cheap and as effective as they can with making companies easier and cheaper to open and operate. Moreover, even if they made it 1/10 the price, that would still be pretty expensive, right? It would still cost me a couple hundred to open and 10, 20 a month to run, plus time, plus all of this. But there is so much collaboration in our lives which would benefit from more structure, better agreement, more clarity, right? So my dream is the question that I am coming into this with, how can we make creating a collaboration container company as easy as starting a WhatsApp group?
Okay.
So this is the image that I'm working towards, as easy, and then again in an open way where different people can create all different kinds of interfaces and stuff, because everything is collaboration and it's not just about money and business. You're organizing we are organizing an outing. You and I were going for a weekend for 2 days. We have to organize the budget and the timing and agreements and all of this. It's a collaboration, right? And we're doing it back and forth with text messages. But if we had a collaboration container which enabled us to create more structure to it, we could collaborate much more effectively.
I'm very, very, very interested in that, because one of the things that I'll tell you when we kind of cease the recording, and I'll tell you a bit more about my recent 48 hours, 72 hours, but to give you a bit of a light into that. When I spoke to you about the For You and I come to understand that what I want with For You and I very much links to what you are saying. And it is, and I need to investigate because there are definitely loads of them quite likely already there. So it has to be seen of its relevance or not. But I see it as a needs and offers platform. In a way, every marketplace is a needs and offers platform. And if we can activate what you want to offer and what you need to be solved in as fast way as you are saying, then we are talking about the same thing. Somehow. We need to understand what is out there, who is in the need for what, who has the capacity to do what, and how can they come together. And this is what I do when I say that I want to make the 41i a reality. It has to orchestrate value flows, and that is my interest, to come close to Rebecca and to Pedro. And I was very interested in what you wrote in the group with Pavel yesterday. Remember when you said about the collaborate? And you mentioned that a friend of yours that is also in the value, in the flows of value arena, right? So, and there is one thing that is intuitively emerging from here. It is taking years, but it's been years for decades. And again, it is still blurry, but it will get more and more clear as I speak about it and as I work on it, which is when you mentioned the cars running in an asphalt infrastructure. A few years ago, maybe 10 years ago or something, my vision is that we create an infrastructure so that what we definitely need is catered for. And then we have everything else that it's more a want than a need. This links together with the notion of abundance. This needs together with the notion of reciprocity, exchanging value. Yesterday, I spoke with Tom Greco. Tom Greco is, as he said to me yesterday, 30 years older than me. And he was part of the first physical gathering that I organized in Setúbal in 2002, then 2003, then 2004. He came for the first one.
But Antonio, I thought the first physical gathering was in high school.
Well, I mean, this new age, so to say, physical gathering. And he wrote a book called The End of Money. And all his life,
that guy. Yeah, I remember that book.
he's a retired economist, I really want to
You
visit
know,
him in the US.
you know him.
He's now in his 90s or late 80s. And yesterday he said, Antonio, I am rewriting the book. It had the revision in 2019, and now I'm making another one. And I'm going to seek his homepage. And he said that the first 14 chapters revised are already there. I have written the 15th, and I've sent it a few hours ago. He told me yesterday to two people that when I have the go ahead, I will also publish the 15th. And I asked him, so how many in total? He said, I would guess around 20. And he said, until we separate, he says, I don't believe in blockchain. I don't believe in Bitcoin because it's just bringing old problems to different formats in a way, he said. And he said, until we separate the three functions of money, separating them, we have trouble. And he said, value reserve, means of accounting, and exchange of value. And there is something here, I was going to call you Hugo for some reason. There is something here, Victor, that connects to my intuition of an open-ended cone. Open-ended because abundance is endless, but it's a cone because you need to have a base on which you live. And the more I've been thinking on what am I doing here? What have I done and what do I still have to do? I felt in these last 3 days that I am being, and today speaking with Graham in the morning, he mentioned something that you also almost for sure know, this small video of the first follower of the guy that is dancing in a festival. You know that? How you create a community? And he said, you are being a very significant first follower. For things that I'm talking, he said, for other people, God knows to what extent, to what you are doing with Victor. And I agree with that, and I'm very happy with that. But I also have a dance that I want to perform before anybody else is following. So, with all the interest and all the thankfulness and all the will that I have to be with you in the forefront of what is being done here, I was asking myself, am I being just a very lucky follower, or can I also be a starter of something? And I would like to be doing both. Do you understand what I mean? And there are two reasons for this. One is bad, which is ego stuff. And the other one is good, which is probably and possibly I see things like nobody else sees, as any human being has the ability to, right? I'm not special because of that. I'm just a human being that has that too. And the more I can manage to bring that to surface, the better I will be with everything else that I do. So, finalizing, it is very interesting to understand how do you see that this notion of infrastructuring what we as a species need to be able to function. And again, I see two major things. Physical world, bits and atoms, and I would include in that whatever is done in virtual terms, and emotional world. How do we operate? As an individual, as groups, how happy, how aligned, how belonging, how individually are we okay in being? So back to where we were. Agreements.
Yes. So I think, again, connecting with just briefly on the money thing, it's Thomas Greco,
Yes,
right?
Thomas Greco Jr.,
Yeah,
but Thomas Greco.
I have the book. I don't think I ever finished reading it, but I have the book. It's interesting, and you know him.
I know him since 2002. in the first chaotic conference that I flew to the US to attend. This is where I met Hugo Spowers, the father of Sterling, and a few others that I've told you about. Hirad from
Brilliant. So look, I mean, the thing that I am trying to be really intentional with is to be clear of what is it that we can get out into the world within our lifetimes.
yes,
And the Reds changed the money system. Like I say, there's 100 years of much smarter people than us putting in a lot of effort, thought, and dedicating their lifetimes to making something happen and failing. I really want to find something that we can actually move and shift in our life. And I think this space of micro entrepreneurship, once we get people into richer digital collaboration spaces, then adding new ways of value exchange and all of this will be easy. But I think having observed this world, there was this whole we share revolution and sharing economy, and we just ended up with Uber and Airbnb, some of the more extractive companies out of it, and so on and so forth. So I think we have to be really, and this is why this coherence and all of this, we have to be really thoughtful and intentional and finding things which we can actually bring into the world. And I don't know, maybe I'll go to jail for saying this one day or another. What I'm searching for is technologies which are subversive in a way that they will bring people into using them at scale now, and there'll be a wedge and open the door into those further new value exchanges and those things, right? So something that doesn't feel like a threat to the state head on, right? Because until we have a movement of hundreds of millions of billions in our technology, our app, our vision, going up against the system of the nation state is suicide, right? Don't fight the nation state until you're powerful enough, right? And hopefully don't fight it at all. Just create the conditions for it to slowly fade away.
yes,
So that's why I think supporting entrepreneurship, collaboration, creativity is an easy and safe entry because everybody wants more entrepreneurship. Creating tools for the precariat, the world's poorest 1 billion, to collaborate and work together more effectively, most states will not go up against you because it doesn't seem scary. And then that can, like we need to create the crack, right? And we've shown with Facebook, with even Google, right? Google affects businesses, SEO, Google changes its algorithm and a whole bunch of businesses die and a whole bunch of businesses succeed, right? So this is my question. What can we get out into the world that seems fun, innocent, and useful now, but will get us at scale on this journey and open up the possibility for these things? Going back to I fully agree with you, this leader and follower. I am leading a bunch of things myself, which means when I go into a meeting and I'm not leading, I'm just there to participate, to contribute, I feel so happy. Right? Like it's so much lighter. And I think it also goes with creating this venture family and new ways of building businesses where we can be part of a bigger thing. And it's like natural human collaboration is, right? If we're around a house or a camp or whatever, sometimes one person leads, then the other person leads. Sometimes it just flows fluidly depending on what we're doing, on who has competence, who has energy, who has motivation, who has ideas, right? So I think for me, that's the kind of collaboration that I dream of. So I very much look forward to being your follower and dancing your tune. And yeah. I think we have, like you said, I think there's great people around. I think there's great ideas around. I think what we really need to bring to this space is highly ambitious, but also highly realistic plans for bringing these ideas, these tools, these ways of collaborating together to large number of peoples. That's why in the blockchain space, they call digital companies DAOs. It's not quite a useful name, but that's the name that we have, so good enough for now. I am really challenging to people to think of 1 billion DAOs. How do we get to having 1 billion DAOs? Hi, Alex, just give us 5 minutes. Because if you think about it, right, there is 2 billion smartphones, something like 200 million companies and organizations around the world. There is 6 or 7 billion smartphones. If we think of every collaboration, every kid's birthday party, every friend's outing, like everything, it's all collaborations when you start looking at that way. And if we make it as easy to create a collaboration container as it is to create a WhatsApp group or a chat group, then they'll very easily get to 1 billion collaborations.
Yes.
So that's the idea.
Yes. We need to find the $1 million answer, which is what is easy enough and that deflagrates fast enough, that creates momentum, that creates recognition. That's where we have to go without compromising the essence of what we want to be making happen. And I think that that is a lot on what we can talk during the next some days when we'll be together.
Yes, and for me, it's not about finding the one thing, it's about finding the family. So I see it because we're looking at open protocols, interoperable softwares, right? Not this one monolith of the corporation where we are trying to control the world, but creating a group of companies, each solving different parts of the problem, which come together to a greater whole and become this investable, go outable, into the world growing thing.
Yes. But what I mean by the one thing is a first step, something that will give us visibility and critical mass. That is probably going to be one at a time. And if we find the first one, if we manage to find the first one, it's quite likely that then it will open
So
up.
we will talk about it more, but again, I believe it's not the one thing, it's about the family of things. But that will be a whole separate conversation.
Yes. Okay, my friend. So I'll stop recording and we'll invite Alex to the conversation now. Thank you.